When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, the world wept for the king of pop. But hidden beneath the grief was a financial empire no one saw coming. From $500 million in debt to a dynasty worth over $2.5 billion, Michael's estate became the greatest posthumous comeback in music history. His will, his children, and his foresight turned tragedy into fortune, so massive it left his own family stunned, divided, and in tears. Michael Jackson's death left behind more than grief. On June 25, 2009, the world stood still. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. at UCLA Medical Center after suffering cardiac arrest at age 50. News stations from Los Angeles to London replayed footage of ambulances, tearful fans, and candlelit vigils. For billions of admirers, Michael's passing meant the loss of a global icon who had defined music from the 1970s through the 1990s. But behind the grief was a darker truth. The glamorous image of a superstar concealed a mountain of financial chaos. The headlines in 2009 didn't just mourn his artistry. They revealed shocking numbers. Michael had left behind nearly $500 million in debt. Lawsuits were pending in multiple courts, from unpaid taxes owed to the IRS to outstanding loans from Bank of America and Fortress Investment Group. Former employees filed claims for back payroll, and contractors demanded millions in overdue fees. Despite selling out 50 concerts in London's O2 Arena, scheduled for July 2009, the king of pop was, in financial terms, bankrupt. His sudden death exposed a life where cash flow couldn't keep pace with a lavish lifestyle. At the root of his downfall was spending. Court documents later revealed Michael's expenses reached an astonishing $30 million per year. He maintained a small army of staff, bodyguards, chefs, doctors, tutors for his children, while also paying lawyers millions annually. Exotic purchases piled on. Giraffes, chimpanzees, priceless artwork, and antiques filled his properties. The crown jewel, Neverland Ranch, devoured millions in upkeep alone. Despite touring revenues and record royalties, Michael's money evaporated faster than it came in. By the mid-2000s, creditors circled like vultures, threatening foreclosure and legal seizures. But buried in the chaos was a single document that would outlast the scandals. When lawyers opened Michael's safe deposit box, they discovered his last will, signed in 2002. Those pages, structured with clinical precision, would not only decide who inherited his fortune, but also ignite bitter family battles. Far from the fairy tale of unlimited wealth, Michael Jackson's death left a trail of grief, confusion, and legal intrigue that would define his legacy as much as his music. The world thought Michael's death would bring sympathy, unity, and shared mourning. Instead, it unearthed the most divisive chapter in Jackson family history. At the center was the will, a document drafted years earlier when Michael was already struggling with fame, finances, and trust. It contained decisions so calculated, so controversial, that even his closest relatives were left shocked and powerless. What Michael wrote in 2002 would rewrite the future of his estate, his children, and his dynasty. The will that shocked the Jackson family. Michael Jackson's last will, dated July 7, 2002, was a bombshell. Signed in Los Angeles, it outlined his final wishes with cold precision. Unlike many celebrities who left vague instructions, Michael detailed exactly how every cent of his estate should be distributed. The breakdown was simple: 40% to his 3 children, Prince, born 1997, Paris, born 1998, and Blanket, born 2002. 40% to his mother, Katherine Jackson, born 1930, and 20% to designated charities. Left out completely? His brothers and sisters, the very siblings who had shared stages with him in the Jackson 5. The omission devastated his family. In 2009, shortly after the will was read, siblings like Jermaine, LaToya, and Randy Jackson publicly expressed disbelief. They had assumed Michael, with his empire worth billions in potential, would leave them something. Instead, his will made no provision for them. What made it worse was that Michael didn't entrust his family with power either. He appointed two executors, John Branca, his longtime attorney, and John McClain, a veteran music executive. These men, not the Jackson family, would control the estate and decide how to manage his name, image, and assets. The structure of the will left no room for debate. Katherine Jackson would act as guardian for the children, but all financial control sat firmly with the executors. Family members attempted to challenge the will in court in 2012, alleging forgery and undue influence, but judges dismissed the claims, citing notarized documents and witness signatures. The Jackson siblings, once global stars themselves in the 1970s, were legally powerless to overturn Michael's final words. The empire no longer belonged to them. It belonged to Michael's chosen executors and his heirs. The clarity of the will didn't erase the bitterness. For the Jackson siblings, who had endured decades of touring and public scrutiny alongside Michael, exclusion from his fortune felt like betrayal. For Katherine, it was both a blessing and a burden. At 79 years old in 2009, she inherited both responsibility and wealth. For Michael's children, it was the start of a lifetime under microscopes, not only as his heirs, but as the new protectors of his brand. The will wasn't just a legal document. It was a torch passed into the next generation, one that carried immense weight, controversy, and responsibility. Michael's siblings may have felt cut out, but the executors didn't waste time mourning over disputes. They had an empire in ruins to rebuild. With nearly $500 million in debt, the estate looked doomed. But under Branca and McClain's leadership, what seemed like financial collapse turned into one of the most stunning comebacks in entertainment history. Within years, Michael Jackson's name wasn't tied to debt. It was tied to billions. The king of pop was about to rise again, this time from beyond the grave. From broke to billionaire. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, his estate was drowning in almost $500 million of debt. To the public, it looked like financial ruin. But within months, executors John Branca and John McClain began treating the estate like a Fortune 500 company. They had decades of experience in music law and production, and they knew Michael's brand still carried global weight. Their first goal was simple: stop the bleeding, stabilize assets, and rebuild his image. The comeback started with "This Is It." Just 4 months after Michael's passing, the estate released the concert film compiled from rehearsals for the London shows he never lived to perform. Premiering in October 2009, it grossed over $260 million worldwide in theaters and DVD sales. Fans lined up in Tokyo, Los Angeles, and London to see their idol one last time. The film's success proved that, even in death, Michael remained the biggest draw in entertainment. It was the cornerstone of a financial resurrection. Branca and McClain followed with strategic licensing deals. By 2010, they partnered with Sony Music on a $250 million contract. the largest recording deal in history at that time. The estate approved posthumous albums, merchandise lines, video games, and tribute shows. Cirque du Soleil launched Michael Jackson, the Immortal World Tour, in 2011, which grossed more than $370 million globally. Every move was carefully calculated to maximize revenue while keeping Michael's name in the spotlight. The effect was staggering. Fans flooded back, and creditors started fading into the background. By 2014, the debt was gone. Court filings revealed the estate had generated more than $1 billion in revenue within 5 years of Michael's death. What had looked like financial collapse became one of the most dramatic turnarounds in show business. Michael's legacy shifted from debt-ridden to billionaire-level empire. For his children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, it meant security. For his executors, it was vindication. They had not just saved Michael's name, they had made it stronger in death than it had been in his final years. But the estate's financial resurrection wasn't built only on licensing and concerts. A hidden ace had been sitting in Michael's portfolio since the 1980s, a bold purchase that shocked the industry and even strained friendships. It was a single deal that ensured his heirs would never know poverty. When the estate finally moved to cash it out in 2016, the payoff was staggering. The investment wasn't in real estate or films, it was in music history itself. The Beatles catalog. The Beatles catalog. Back in 1985, Michael Jackson stunned the music world with a move that critics called both brilliant and ruthless. At just 27 years old, he purchased the ATV music publishing catalog for $41.5 million. That catalog included more than 250 Beatles songs, along with tracks from other iconic artists. It was a business play, not just an artistic one, and it changed the industry forever. Overnight, Michael became one of the most powerful figures in publishing. The purchase strained his friendship with Paul McCartney, who had encouraged Michael to invest in publishing during the early 1980s. McCartney himself had wanted the Beatles catalog, but Michael outbid him. Their relationship cooled dramatically after the deal, with McCartney later admitting in interviews that he felt betrayed. Still, the catalog gave Michael leverage far beyond performance. Every time a Beatles song was used in a commercial, film, or cover version, royalties flowed directly to him. By the 1990s, a TV had become a cornerstone of his wealth. In 1995, Michael struck an even bigger deal. He merged ATV with Sony Music Publishing, creating Sony/ATV, the largest publishing company in the world. Michael retained a 50% stake, while Sony took the other half. This partnership gave him access to a vast global infrastructure, ensuring the catalog continued to grow in value. Despite his mounting debts in the 2000s, Michael never lost his share of Sony/ATV, a decision that would later safeguard his family's fortune. The final payoff came in 2016, 7 years after his death. The estate sold Michael's 50% stake in Sony/ATV back to Sony for $750 million. It was one of the largest publishing transactions in history. That single deal transformed the financial future of his heirs, wiping away any lingering doubts about their stability. What began as a $41.5 million gamble in 1985 became the cornerstone of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Michael's foresight had secured generational wealth for his children and his mother, an empire no scandal could erase. The sale of the Beatles catalog cemented Michael's legacy as not just an entertainer, but a shrewd businessman. And while his siblings fought in courtrooms, his heirs quietly grew into young adults with immense wealth and influence, no longer children shielded from the spotlight. Prince, Paris, and Blanket stepped into the world carrying their father's fortune and his burden. The next chapter of the Jackson saga wasn't about money alone. It was about what the heirs would do with the empire they inherited. Paris, Prince, and Blanket. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, his three children, Prince, born February 13, 1997, Paris, born April 3, 1998, and Blanket, born February 21, 2002, were suddenly heirs to a fortune, but also to the world's spotlight. According to his will signed in 2002, 40% of the estate was set aside for them, split equally. By 2010, court filings estimated that each child's trust would eventually be worth hundreds of millions, safeguarded by lawyers and executors. It wasn't a lump sum, it was a lifetime of security. Paris, the only daughter, stepped most visibly into the limelight. By 2017, she launched a modeling career, appearing on the cover of Rolling Stone. She acted in films like Gringo, 2018, and pursued music, releasing her debut album Wilted in 2020. Her net worth climbed into the tens of millions, but she was more than a beneficiary. Paris became a voice for her father's legacy, giving interviews about Michael's humanity while carving her own artistic path. She embodied both inheritance and independence. Prince, the eldest, took a different route. Graduating from Loyola Marymount University in 2019 with a degree in business, he co-founded King's Son Productions, a media company. Rather than music, Prince focused on storytelling, philanthropy, and maintaining his father's image with quiet dignity. He made appearances at charity events, often emphasizing Michael's humanitarian side. His work with Heal the World Foundation in the 1990s. With wealth secured through trust distributions, Prince used his resources to build influence without chasing fame. Blanket, the youngest, remained the most private. In 2015, at age 13, he changed his name to Biggie Jackson, seeking distance from the nickname that had haunted him since the infamous balcony incident in Berlin, 2002. By 2022, at 20 years old, Biggie began stepping into estate decisions, quietly attending board meetings. Insiders described him as intelligent and cautious, determined not to let the fortune be wasted. Together, the three heirs weren't just beneficiaries of Michael's estate. They were protectors of a billion-dollar empire, young yet already burdened with responsibility. But Michael hadn't entrusted his fortune to his children alone. The will gave equal weight to another figure, his mother, Katherine Jackson, who had stood by him since his first notes with the Jackson Five in 1964. 40% of the estate was placed in trust for her care, ensuring comfort in her twilight years. For the matriarch of the Jackson family, this wealth brought power, responsibility, and controversy, as she became both guardian and gatekeeper in the years after Michael's passing. Katherine Jackson. Born on May 4, 1930 in Barber County, Alabama, Katherine Jackson had spent nearly her entire life watching over her children. When Michael died in 2009, his will granted her 40% of his estate, making her not only guardian of his children, but also controller of immense wealth. By 2010, financial disclosures revealed Katherine received a monthly stipend of $37,000, plus expenses for housing, travel, and medical care. Within a decade, her net worth exceeded $100 million. Katherine's role extended beyond personal comfort. For years, she helped raise Michael's children inside the Jackson family compound in Calabasas, California. She ensured stability during chaotic times, especially after the highly publicized custody battle in 2009, when she was granted guardianship. Though later she passed most responsibilities to her grandson T.J. Jackson in 2012, she remained a steady presence in their lives, a grandmother who balanced love with the weight of managing billions. Her fortune also became a lifeline for the wider Jackson family. Siblings who had been excluded from Michael's 2002 will, like Jermaine, LaToya, and Randy, often leaned on Catherine for financial support. Reports from 2014 suggested she quietly provided housing and allowances to struggling relatives. This generosity reinforced her role as the matriarch who kept the family together, even when Michael's legal documents had divided them. Yet it also placed her in the middle of disputes, as beneficiaries clashed over how the estate should be used. Despite her age, Catherine remained influential well into her 90s. Court records from 2021 show she participated in estate-related decisions, sometimes opposing the executors, other times siding with them. For the public, she symbolized continuity. The woman who had raised the Jackson Five, guided Michael through fame, and now protected his heirs. For the family, she was the last anchor, a reminder of simpler days before lawsuits, debts, and billion-dollar empires. Catherine's inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was the power to shape the future of the Jackson dynasty. But money couldn't preserve everything. One piece of Michael Jackson's world, the most famous of all, was too heavy to maintain. Neverland Ranch, once his sanctuary and symbol of extravagance, became a liability after his death. The estate spent millions each year just to keep the lights on and the gates locked. By the late 2010s, the dreamland of the King of Pop had become a financial burden. And in 2020, the Jacksons finally said goodbye to Neverland. Neverland sold. For fans, Neverland Ranch was more than a home. It was Michael Jackson's kingdom. Built in 1988, at a cost of nearly $17 million, the sprawling 2,700-acre estate in Los Olivos, California, became synonymous with his eccentric lifestyle. It housed a zoo with giraffes and elephants, a private amusement park with rides, and a theater. During the late 1980s and 1990s, Michael hosted hundreds of children there, creating a fairy tale image of generosity and escape. But by the mid-2000s, Neverland's magic had turned into scandal and financial ruin. In 2005, Michael's trial for child molestation changed everything. Though acquitted, the intense scrutiny forever stained Neverland. He abandoned the property that same year, never to live there again. By 2008, foreclosure loomed as he defaulted on loans tied to the estate. Creditors demanded repayment on more than $24 million secured against the ranch. To save it, Michael transferred Neverland to a joint venture with Colony Capital, a private equity firm led by Tom Barrack. It was the first step toward losing the property he once called paradise. After Michael's death in 2009, Neverland became a ghost of itself. Maintenance costs soared, millions each year just for security, landscaping, and utilities. The zoo animals were gone, the rides dismantled, but expenses continued. Fans continued to flock to the gates on anniversaries, but the estate had no plan for the property. By 2015, Neverland was listed for sale at $100 million, later reduced to $67 million. Yet buyers stayed away, wary of its baggage and costs. But while Neverland was lost, Michael Jackson's empire was far from fading. Even in death, his name generated record-breaking deals. In 2024, nearly 15 years after his passing, the estate struck the biggest music rights transaction in history. It wasn't just about cash. It was about cementing Michael's influence for generations. At a time when catalogs from Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen made headlines, The king of pop proved once again he was in a league of his own. The 2024 Sony mega deal that broke records. In February 2024, Sony announced a staggering purchase. It had acquired a 50% stake in Michael Jackson's music catalog for more than $600 million. The deal valued the entire catalog at $1.2 billion, making it the largest transaction of its kind in history. Unlike earlier sales involving David Bowie or Queen, this agreement excluded Michael's image, likeness, and unreleased material. What Sony acquired was the music, a portfolio of hits spanning from the Jackson 5 era of 1969 to Thriller in 1982 and beyond. Industry analysts were stunned. For perspective, Bruce Springsteen had sold his catalog in 2021 for around $500 million, while Bob Dylan's catalog fetched nearly $400 million. Michael's deal dwarfed them all. Even decades after his prime, his work retained unparalleled value. Billie Jean, Beat It, Man in the Mirror, songs that continued to stream billions of times each year, formed the backbone of a catalog that seemed almost recession-proof. The King of Pop wasn't just a cultural force. He was a financial one. The deal also proved the estate's long-term vision. Since 2009, executors had managed Michael's assets with corporate precision, ensuring that no short-term cash grab would undermine his legacy. By 2024, those choices paid off. The catalog sale gave the estate a windfall, while still preserving control over his brand. With unreleased material, film projects, and merchandise rights untouched, the Jackson heirs and executors still held enormous power. Sony gained the music, but the Jackson family retained the myth. Yet wealth alone could not protect the Jackson family from conflict. As the estate grew stronger, so did disagreements over how money should be spent. By the early 2020s, a surprising voice emerged: the youngest heir, Biggie Jackson. Once the most sheltered of Michael's children, Biggie began stepping into the spotlight with a clear message. The estate needed accountability. His actions would reshape the family dynamic and signal a new era where the next generation demanded control. Blanket steps up. Born February 21, 2002, and once nicknamed Blanket, Biggie Jackson had spent his childhood shielded from the world. But by 2021, as he turned 19, he began to take an active interest in estate affairs. What surprised many was his seriousness. Biggie wasn't chasing fame like his sister Paris, or building media projects like his brother Prince. He was scrutinizing legal documents, financial filings, and estate decisions. For the first time, the shy boy who once clung to Michael's side was finding his own voice. The turning point came in 2022, when estate funds were used to cover ongoing lawsuits, including disputes involving Michael's posthumous image rights. Biggie objected. Filing court papers in Los Angeles Superior Court, he argued that the executors, and even his grandmother, Katherine Jackson, were mismanaging resources. His stance shocked observers, a grandson challenging the matriarch herself. But Biggie's message was simple. This was his father's legacy, and the heirs deserved transparency. In 2023, the court sided with Biggie. Judges ruled that the executors had acted within their rights, but agreed the heirs had standing to challenge certain expenses. It was a symbolic victory, showing that Michael's children were no longer passive beneficiaries. They were active guardians of the empire. For Biggie, it was proof that he could stand shoulder to shoulder with lawyers, trustees, and even family elders to defend his father's fortune. And yet, amid the billions and the victories, the story remained bittersweet. Michael Jackson had dreamed of providing for his family, but the road there was paved with heartbreak, debt, lawsuits, scandals, and his early death at just 50 years old. What he left behind was more than a fortune. It was a paradox, a machine that printed wealth, but also stirred endless battles. In the end, his legacy became both triumph and tragedy, the fortune that made his heirs cry. The fortune that made them cry. From financial disaster to astonishing wealth, the arc of Michael Jackson's estate is one of the most dramatic in entertainment history. In 2009, he was buried under nearly $500 million of debt. By 2024, his empire was valued at over $2.5 billion. The transformation stunned experts who once predicted collapse. What saved it was strategy. Executors who ran it like a corporation, children who embraced their roles, and a global fan base that refused to let the King of Pop fade into obscurity. For his children, the fortune meant security. Paris lives comfortably as a musician and actress. Prince thrives as a media entrepreneur, and Biggie ensures the estate is run responsibly. Each receives income from carefully managed trusts, guaranteeing wealth for decades. Their lives are defined not by struggle, but by opportunity. Yet wealth can't erase loss. The children often speak of Michael not as a superstar, but as Dad, a man taken from them too soon on June 25, 2009. For Katherine Jackson, the matriarch, the estate provided dignity in her final years. With a net worth surpassing $100 million, she remained protected and influential well into her 90s. She lived to see her grandchildren grow into capable heirs, ensuring Michael's promise that his mother would always be cared for was fulfilled. But for Michael's siblings, excluded from the will, the estate remained a source of bitterness. Lawsuits, public disputes, and financial dependence on Katherine kept tensions alive. In the end, Michael Jackson left behind more than money. He left a machine that continues to generate billions, a dynasty that straddles love and conflict, and a legacy that will echo for generations. The fortune is both blessing and curse, a monument to his brilliance and a reminder of his flaws. It made his children rich beyond imagination, but it also made them guardians of a story forever marked by tragedy. The King of Pop may be gone, but the empire he left is eternal.